Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. Been a little while since we recorded one here. With the holidays and whatnot, things got a little bit sidetracked. And I also had a PC issue that sort of caused us to completely start fresh, but that's okay because we are now officially in 2025. It's a brand new year. Bunch of new exciting games are coming out. But before we really give the year its due, I have to look back on 2024 and discuss my top 10 favorite games from the previous year. I've done a video like this every year since 2018, 2019, something like that, and so I like to have these available as a way to sort of capture my feelings in the moment at that time to see what games I really cared about. I did do a stream. For those that aren't aware, every year I do a big Twitch stream where I build my top 10 list live. I do the entire process. I take every game I beat from that year, I whittle the entire thing down, and I organize it and rank them all live on the air. It's a very fun stream. It's very interactive. We're always going back and forth about what games good, what games were a little rough that year. I give some fun stats about all the games I played, both in and out of 2024. So I really encourage you next year, or this year, I suppose, in 2025, come check that out. It's a lot of fun. I'll put a link in the description to both my Twitch page and to the VOD of that video this year, because I think it'll give you a sense of what those streams are like, and they're a lot of fun. But I did do that stream, and it gave me 10 games that I loved this year, so we're going to kick it off with number 10. Hello. Coming to you from the editor's chair. Want to give you a heads up that as part of me rebuilding my PC that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, turns out the old microphone here got a little aggressive, trying to steal my voice from me sometimes. Settings issues, we'll work them out. But as a result, as you're listening to the video, you'll probably notice a couple of parts where it kind of like eats my voice. I go silent when I shouldn't. I've tried to edit around a lot of them, but definitely some of them are still sitting in there. Hopefully it's still an enjoyable video for you. You can still get something out of it. I didn't want to push it back any further. We're already into 2025, and I don't really have time to pre-record the whole thing, so it's still pretty solid, pretty salvageable. You're probably going to treat it like a podcast and just overlook those parts anyways, but I just wanted to let you know. We'll get it sorted for future videos. And I mean, this is very in keeping with the 2008 level YouTube production values of my channel anyways, so I think you still have a good time. Much love, peace, back to the video. I think that the 10th place on a Game of the Year list is for what I like to call the freak pick, all right? So as I'm building my list out, every year there's probably 4, 5, 6 games that really sort of rise to the surface where you, in the back of your head, you kind of know almost definitely this is going to be one of my games of the year. And then you have a few games after that that are like, these don't quite hit that same level for me, but they're really good. I want to give them their due, or I think that they are doing something really impressive that's worth celebrating, something like that. And then that 10th spot, you're always down to like a pool of games, something like 10 or less games, maybe 5, 6, 7 games, and any of them really could be the number 10 spot. But because I cut it off as 10, only one can make it, and I don't do any honorable mentions or anything like that. So I went back and forth. There's a lot of great games that I considered putting into this spot this year. Really great indie platformer called Leap Year that I really liked. Celeste 64, the Celeste 3D platformer that was put out by the folks that made Celeste, the 2D platformer, and a bunch of other stuff. But the one I ultimately ended up going with this year is Indica. Indica is how do you even describe Indica? It's weird. It's like watching an indie film in a lot of ways. The premise of the game is you play as this woman who's a sister in a monastery who's tasked with delivering a letter as part of her duties as a nun. And the journey to deliver that letter and the characters you meet and the places you go are sort of just the motivation for you to experience a bunch of different events and put you in a bunch of different situations that either test or challenge this woman's faith. As she's walking around, she has this voice inside of her head that you're not really entirely clear from the outside of the game. Is this the narrator having some fun, kind of Stanley Parable style? Is this, does she have the devil talking inside her head? You don't know. You have no idea what's going on. And that voice gives like context and modifies situations a little bit, or maybe not modifies, but it will provide an alternative perspective to things where you're like, interesting. And then on top of that, the game does a lot of like played straight but very surreal, kind of unusual things. You know, you'll be playing and you'll be asked to, very early on, for example, you're asked to bring water to another one of the nuns in the monastery. And you have to bring the bucket over to the well, fill it up, and bring the bucket back. But then as you're doing that, even though this is a very like serious kind of photorealistic style game, suddenly it pops up this little like pixelated number counter in the corner, and it's making these like dinging noises. It's like gamifying the process of you bringing this water to this woman in a way where, like, you know, it stands out because this is not like World of Warcraft or like an Ubisoft open world where you are, you know, you expect to see a little HUD in the corner that says like 1 of 5 water buckets delivered. This is like a game that is really taking itself seriously, so for them to like do this and call attention to it, and for it to like strike such a contrast to the rest of the play experience, it catches you off guard, and it makes you go like, what are they trying to say here, you know? And as you play through the game, you know, you'll learn more about themes that the game has. You know, it's touching on things like faith and identity. It's touching on your role as the player. It's doing a lot of interesting things. It's a real sleeper hit, strange game, one that sticks in the back of your mind, and one that I'd like to see more people check out. So yeah, definitely number 10, Indica, very cool. My number 9 game is also the game that I spent the most time playing on my Xbox this year, and that is the action time-based Zelda meets Persona that is Dungeons of Hinterberg. This is the vibes game of the year for me, for sure. 100%. I just liked spending time in this world, getting to know these characters. If you've never seen the game before, if you're unfamiliar, Dungeons of Hinterberg really is that on the tin pitch of Zelda meets Persona. So you play as this woman who is sort of taking a vacation from her job. I believe she's a lawyer back in the big city. And you're in this like idyllic, beautiful kind of ski resort, mountain town, cute little like village, lakeside with mountains surrounding you. And the premise of this location, or kind of like the setup, is that magic has been discovered in this world, but it's been commoditized. So magic has cropped up in this mountainous area. And so they've set up like kind of fake challenges that people can come do to feel like a real adventurer, basically to feel like they're in an action RPG. They can use magic and fight monsters and all that stuff. It's been commoditized. And so people treat this as a tourism destination. You know, this is a travel destination for them to go to, for them to then kind of just like get to live that experience, you know, be their own World of Warcraft character, whatever it might be. Play Final Fantasy XIV in real life. And so you go as this woman who's going there just to kind of like, you know, she's exhausted at her job, she's feeling burnout, you just want to mix things up. And start doing these dungeons, and obviously, you know, like a plot unfolds, and there's more to the story, and the story actually goes in some interesting places. I actually like it quite a bit, but that's not really the main hook for me. For me, it was just the day-to-day vibe, you know, every day waking up, having a cup of coffee, looking out over that lakeside, deciding, you know, where am I going to go dungeoning today? You know, how am I going to spend my time? Or maybe I'm not even going to go to one of the dungeons today. You know, maybe I'm just going to go find a picnic bench out on one of the mountainsides and just chill there listening to the wind. Or, you know, maybe I'm in the mood to go do a puzzly dungeon, you know, one that, you know, has minecart puzzles or something like that. And then in the evenings, you get to come back and you'll spend time with, you know, a whole bunch of characters that are in this town. You know, obviously you'll be talking to characters that are residents of this town, and you get some really interesting perspective from them around, you know, some of the people are like happy about how this town has suddenly taken off, and you know, it provided them a lot of good business opportunities. You'll have other people that feel like the soul of what their town once was is gone. You know, it's been gentrified away essentially, and they're struggling with whether or not this is even a place they can call home anymore. Then you meet a whole bunch of other adventurers that, you know, range from people just like you that are just trying to get away and have a little bit of fun, people that are sort of like long-term stayers here that almost live in or adjacent to this town and venture all the time. You find like social media influencers that have built up channels and Twitch stream followings basically about doing these dungeons and adventures. And yeah, it's just a really interesting time. It's a really great vibe, a really, really great mood piece for the year. No other game felt like it. It was really relaxing. It was really great to get into a rhythm of every night sitting down, playing 2-3 days maybe, you know, putting an hour and a half into the game and just sort of letting it wash over me before I moved on. Which brings us to number 8. My number 8 is a little indie hidden gem called Grune. So Grune is the easy pitch for Grune is take the mechanics, like the time loop style gameplay of Outer Wilds, but rather than exploring the entire clockwork solar system in Outer Wilds, in Grune you instead are a gardener in a very unusual garden, I will say. This is a game that I can't speak too much on because discovery is one of the big benefits of the game. You'll spend, you'll start out and you'll just get your hedge clippers and you'll start cutting some grass, and then before you know it, you'll notice some odd behavior in the world, or, you know, you'll see a little something crop up and you'll be like, what's that? And you'll go explore that. And that'll lead you to another destination and another destination, and things just kind of start unfolding in a way that you couldn't really predict in this game. But what's really nice about it is because it uses that time loop mechanic, you will kind of get breadcrumbs, hints, clues about things you want to explore, you know, almost like plot lines you want to develop, or just places you want to learn more about. And you'll be able to go during your next run and, using the information that you've learned from your previous runs, kind of jump right into that track and start exploring it. It's, you know, it's one of those games that falls into the Metroidvania genre, where your only real progression is information. It's what you've learned about the world. And so, you know, 10 hours into the game, 5 hours into the game, your runs are going to look unrecognizable to when you first started the game, because you're doing entirely different things. You know so much more now. You're sort of able to beat the game where it's at and push into further undeveloped paths more easily. Just a phenomenal mystery game. Really a surprise for me. A big reason I love this game so much is that I had no expectations about what this game would be going into it. It was really kind of a surprise hit for me. So I want to, as much as I can, let you have that same experience, and hopefully you enjoy Grune as well. Really excellent game. Currently only available on PC, probably will only be available on PC, so PC gamers, Number 7. This is a big indie game that you'll see on a lot of folks' lists, and that is easily the best narrative of the year, 1000 Times Resist. I am overwhelmed at the idea of even trying to explain 1000 Times Resist to you. It is so many things and so unique to each individual's experience of playing it that you're really going to bring, I think, your own history into the game, and you're going to take away your own theme. It's really quite unique in that way. But 1000 Times Resist exists as this story where you play as a woman named Watcher, and you exist in this sort of micro society that is built around a religion focused on what they refer to as the Allmother, who you quickly learn in the game is a teenage woman who essentially like survived the apocalypse. That's not exactly the way to frame it, but it gets you the rough idea without explaining the nuance of the game. And so you have themes in this game as you walk around and play it that are touching on, you know, how a society like that runs. You know, this is very much like a post-COVID impact game where, following the apocalypse, which has some real COVID analogs, how does society build, or how do people respond to that? It's got themes around motherhood, around being removed from your home and trying to make a new life in a new place. It's just an incredible narrative top to bottom. And it, in like the 13 to 15 hour runtime, I was constantly impressed at the way that they would wrap these themes together, that the way that the narrative was so cohesive, the way that all of these different characters got room to breathe and got their own life and their own development. But the game never felt rushed, it never felt crammed, it never felt overwhelming, and it never abandoned plot lines that you wanted to see through. So it is mostly a like kind of narrative first game. There's a little bit of light puzzle solving and light mechanics. The game honestly really underdevelops, I think, their like the mechanical side, because it's very clear that this was designed to be a narrative game first. So treat it as a walking sim, you know, like a 13-hour walking sim basically, and you'll have an excellent time. There's no other world like 1,000 Times Resist. There's certainly no game on this list that I will think about for as long as 1,000 Times Resist, and just kind of keep churning it over, kneading that dough in my mind. And so I hopefully you can play it, enjoy it, and get something out of it yourself. Number 6, one of my favorite puzzle games of the year, is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. So this is the next game from Simogo, the follow-up from their previous game, Sayonara Wild Hearts. Although this has nothing to do with Sayonara Wild Hearts, it's unrelated. It just happens to be the next game this studio developed. In fact, tonally, it's probably the exact opposite of Sayonara Wild Hearts, where Sayonara Wild Hearts was colorful, flashy, playful, enthusiastic. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is monochrome, muted, mysterious, slow. It's almost like they turned the dial the exact opposite direction of Sayonara Wild Hearts, which in many ways is exactly what I'm happy to see them doing. You know, it's really interesting. But in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, you're kind of playing... Imagine like the Resident Evil mansion. Imagine exploring that if it was just a bunch of puzzles. Just a ridiculous number of puzzles. And then, you know, as you're exploring this manor, you got this invite to this manor, and as you're exploring it, you start to uncover who lived here, why, and sort of why you've been invited and things like that. But the selling point for this game, the thing that I really loved, was the puzzle design. They do so many different things. There's like puzzles that involve observation and, you know, a careful attention to detail as you look through the environments, you know, combing through, almost pixel hunting, but in a more directed way. There's also puzzles that are kind of standalone that you could, you know, that could just be in a puzzle book that you pulled off the shelf at a Barnes and Noble or something like that. And then there's a whole bunch of other, I guess, like languages, systems, ways of interacting with the world that the game is going to teach you over time and give you sort of this entire new repertoire of abilities, right? Well, mental ability to solve these puzzles. Really just so much fun. Tough, but fair in terms of its puzzle design. I was always enjoying exploring this mansion. This is the type of game you're going to need to write notes on paper, which I always love. I bought a notebook from Annapurna's store that let me fill in the details and solve these puzzles. And yeah, I hope that people will play this one, enjoy this one. I think that it's really a special game and great for puzzle fans. My number 5 game of the year is Ultros. So this is... Actually, let me look. Great year for gated exploration games, my word. So this is one of the best gated exploration games this year. But Ultros is special in a way that no other gated exploration game is. You are on this... It's like this garden space station, essentially. It's like a space station almost where... vegetation, the plant life, the trees, the flowers, everything has sort of overtaken the station. And as you're navigating this world, it's initially very hostile to you. You're fighting monsters and trying to figure out how to navigate around paths that are blocked by this different vegetation, this different plant life. But as you play, the game sort of morphs and shifts and becomes something much more than that, and very different from other gated exploration games. You know, you come to learn how to like cultivate and plant seeds and grow plants that will interact with the environment in different ways. And it's the only gated exploration I've seen where you really learn to kind of become a part of this world that you're in and sort of grow alongside it, rather than just being an oppositional force within it, which is really, really interesting. Plus, Ultros has this phenomenal, I will say it has one of the best puzzles I've ever seen in a game, if you could even call it a puzzle. It is the type of game where as you play, you will develop a better understanding about why you're playing it and what you're even doing here in a way that it's kind of eye-opening. It has kind of like the Witness style moment where you're like, oh, I'm seeing the game for what it really is for the first time. This is incredible. And I had so much fun. I gobbled up every inch of this game, collected all the upgrades, all the hidden stuff. I put 35 hours into this game, which for a platformer style gated exploration game is a lot. So I really hope that everybody will check this one out. Also, visually incredible and my personal favorite soundtrack of the year. So even if you don't play it, my gosh, give Rat Vader soundtrack a listen. They did so good. All right, my number 4 is UFO 50. This game could not have been made more for me if it tried. This is a game that was developed in a lab specifically to appeal to my tastes. UFO 50 is a game, it is a compilation of 50 games, 50 fake retro games, developed for this imaginary system from a company called UFO Soft, where this library has kind of been forgotten, hidden away, and it's being unearthed now by you. It's just you poking at any one of these 50 games you want in any order and checking them out. But each of these games are fully developed, fully realized, like honest to goodness games. It ranges the entire spectrum of genres. There are sports games, there are puzzle games, there are action games, there are platformer games, there are scrolling shooter games. There's so much variety here. And many of these games individually will take you multiple hours to solve. Like, I spent 3 hours just in a first-person point-and-click Shadowgate-style adventure game called Night Manor in this game. And that alone, I would have been happy to have paid money for. Like, this is such an abundance of riches. It's so phenomenally cool. And for someone like me, you look behind me, I have these shelves of games. I really love the feeling of exploring a retro library. One of the things I have the most fun doing on Twitch is digging like deep into either obscure systems or the obscure games in more well-known systems and just seeing what they're all about, what makes them tick, popping something random on and being like, let's give this a shot for a couple hours and see if it lands with us, right? And UFO 50 is a game specifically designed with people like me in mind. It's emulating that feeling of like flipping through dusty carts at a flea market and pulling something you've never heard of and just based on the cover art checking it out. It's incredible, and it exceeded my expectations, which is just, it seems like an impossible task because I was already excited at the idea, and then for it to come out and for the games to be of higher quality and more fun than I was originally anticipating. So we're so lucky this year. We're eating so good. The game does this thing where the games, they all adhere to kind of a consistency in terms of visual design and visual complexity to a certain degree, but the systems games release kind of through the mid 80s into the 90s, and you see the earlier games will be more simplistic arcadey style games. The graphics will be more simple, and then the later games will have more developed narratives. They'll have flashier animations, but all of it still feels cohesive to the like core design architecture of this fake console. So it really emulates the way that developers on the NES or Super Nintendo learned how to get more out of the hardware and learn development tricks that let them, squeeze out some extra power, some extra visual flair from their systems, that's kind of like exactly what I want this game to be, and it's exactly what it is. This honestly would be higher for me, maybe even my number 1 this year, if I had played more of it. I put 20 hours into it, but it's only on PC, and this is the type of game that you will easily dump triple-digit hours into because you can beat all 50 games, and all 50 games have like a hidden criteria to kind of master the game, where it's called you get the cherry on it. So you will dump a lot of time into this game, and my life and my setup is not conducive to playing PC games that much, so I'm really waiting for the console port, probably the PlayStation port. And when it comes out there, I will dump way more time into it, even than I did on PC. And so it kind of was a victim of me not being able to play it as much as I wanted to, but all the same, UFO 50, incredible. All right, my number 3 is a game you're going to see on a lot of Game of the Year lists. Very deserving. The most addictive game of this year by far is Balatro. I don't need to explain to you at this point what Balatro is. You know, it's the poker hand roguelike. You probably know everything about it that I could possibly say. You know how addictive its design is. You know how, like, carefully considered every aspect of this game is. How much variety there is to every build. How there's no, like, extraneous detail. No unnecessary fluff padding the game. No story that distracts. Nothing like that. It's just the core loop of going through these 8 antes, trying to build the best possible poker hands with these crazy multipliers. Some of the best sound design in the game, the most satisfying card flipping and chip stacking sound effects that you're going to hear all year. And yeah, what I will tell you about Balatro that maybe you don't know is how this game hooked me. I was actually initially kind of skeptical of Balatro. I'm not a big I'm not a big deck builder guy. Not because I don't like the genre, because I just haven't really dug into that genre much. And so it was Thanksgiving weekend, and I was at my in-laws house for Thanksgiving. We got there early that day, and we weren't going to be eating for several hours. And so Balatro was recently released on mobile, and I thought to myself, well, you know what? I have a couple hours to kill. This is a game that a lot of people consider a Game of the Year contender, and so I feel like I should be at least aware of what it does. But I went in very much expecting to put a couple hours into it and be like, I get the appeal. It's cool. Maybe not my thing, but I respect it and I know what it does. And within the first 30 minutes, I was like, oh my God. I was building this crazy pair build, and I was, I got to ante 5 or 6, and I was like, the hooks were in an instant. And so for the rest of that day, Thanksgiving, anytime there was a lull in the conversation, or anytime there was a little bit of downtime while folks were cooking or cleaning or in between the meal and dessert, whatever it might have been, any little 5-minute gap I could find, that phone came out and I was doing a couple more hands of Balatro. I was so into it. And then that night, I came home from the in-laws and I immediately downloaded the digital version onto my PlayStation, because I was like, I know I'm good at this game. And then since then, I have put 100 hours into the game. So Balatro is just a phenomenal achievement in terms of like solo development and focused design. Really something deserving of all of its praise, and like a genuine standout. A miracle that this game exists and is so good. All right, my number 2 big 3D platformer this year, the big 3D platformer this year, and you all know that I'm a big 3D platformer fan. It is, of course, Astrobot. I just love Astrobot so much. Of all the games on here, there's a lot of games on here where it's like Balatro's such impressive design, UFO 50 is such a unique idea tailored to my tastes, Indica's so phenomenally weird. Astrobot is it's just the feel-good game, man. It's just the vibes I want. I have an almost 2-year-old at this point, and as I was playing Astrobot, the first thought in my mind was, wow, this game is pulling me back to a lot of moments from the last 20, 30 years of my life, making me very nostalgic. But then my second thought, and maybe even the more dominant thought, was I cannot wait to show this game to my son when he's enough. It is so rare for me to play a game and think like, this is something that I want my kid to experience. This would be a really great introduction to gaming as a whole. And a game that is that accessible, that approachable, but still that fun for someone like me in my mid-30s, that is what that's what we need more of, right? Like that, it's so refreshing to see this as a balance to all of the very self-serious games that Sony and a lot of the first-party publishers these days put out. It is obviously very Nintendo inspired in its design, so much so that the Astrobot folks gave a shout out to Mario in their Game Awards speech. But beyond that, it's more of a testament to what a small focused group of very enthusiastic creatives can do within the AAA structure. It gives me a little more hope that maybe like AAA game development isn't necessarily destined to just be this arms race that eventually collapses in on itself and destroys an entire industry, even though that's very much happening. But Astrobot feels like this bright spot, this shining star, this separating factor from all of that. And it's very corporate, obviously. It's calling back to 1,000 PlayStation properties. It really is saying, like, hey, remember how great PlayStation is? But I interpreted that less cynically. I interpreted that more as, hey, there's people here that celebrate and love these things as much as you all do, and less about, hey, go buy these things on the PlayStation. Maybe I'm just a little ignorant in that regard, but I took it on good faith, and I was like, you know what? This feels earnest, feels genuine, feels earned, feels like the folks at Team Asobi get it. I loved all the different references and things like that. You know, any game where I can play in the Eco costume and I'm finding references to Mr. Mosquito, that's a game built for me for sure. The Astrobot, an incredible game and almost my number one, but it just barely lost out to the actual number one spot, which is, man, Animal Well. Another game that I want to praise, but I also can't say too much about. Animal Well was my mega surprise hit this year. I knew about this game going into it, and I was sort of lightly following it, but I wasn't even really going to pay attention to it. It was a game that I knew about, and I was like, yeah, I'll get around to it whenever, maybe. And it wasn't until it came out, and my good buddy and co-host on the Indie Quest podcast, Captain Drachma, sent me a DM, and he's like, Wii U, red alert. Steve, this is not one you should miss. This is for you. I was like, all right. It was on PlayStation Plus, so I said, all right, I'll check it out. And immediately I was like, oh, this is pretty good. You know, you pop out of this flower and you're playing as this little tiny bean character exploring these kind of echoing, empty, wet, cavernous spaces. You know, you're like pushing through brush and you're poking at the edges of walls to find hidden areas, and you're meeting all these mysterious animal characters that are both unnerving and intriguing at the same time. And I was like, all right, I can get down with this. And then you play the game a little further and you start to find some of the upgrades and abilities. And somehow every item, every ability you get in this game is something I've never really seen in another gated exploration game. A genre that is so tapped, so overdone, and yet here were 10 fresh creative ideas that I've never seen anywhere else. And then on top of that, you continue exploring, you start to learn all these abilities have alternative uses that, you know, cover on your own and figure out that maybe there's more to how to engage with this world than you realized. And then you beat the game and you realize that you've actually kind of just started your adventure, because this game is built under these layers. And the developer has talked about this, where the center layer is kind of the main game. It's beating the game, you know, seeing it through. The next layer is starting to uncover some of the secrets of the world, see what there is in there. And then the next layer outside of that is even deeper mysteries that you probably can't even solve entirely on your own and might need some community involvement. And then there's more even beyond that, which is just wildly impressive. You know, it's a type of game that you're always swapping Discord messages and discussions about where you're like, did you find this? Did you see this? What do you think this means? It's a game that gets everybody energized and excited and just talking to each other about what they're seeing and what they're doing. And you're talking like past each other intentionally, right? You're kind of being coy. You're saying like, did you find this thing that I'm not going to describe to you? That type of thing. And I love that stuff so much. I was like all in on Animal Well when it came out. I think that it is, again, just like Balatro, a like remarkable achievement in solo design. I do not know how either of those games exists, and I hope everyone checks out and enjoys it well, because man, it is a world packed with mysteries, is a world with so much to discover and see, so much to learn, so many interesting ways to engage with the world that you didn't even think were possible. It's just so cool. Check it out. And yeah, that is my top 10 games of 2024. A phenomenal year for games, a phenomenal year for indie games, really. Especially if you look at my list, actually, Astrobot is the only AAA game on there. All other 9 games are indie developers or smaller studio, which is really cool to see. So thanks so much for enjoying the channel through 2024. Thanks so much for watching all the way through this video. And if you did, let me know what your game of the year for 2024 was, or your games of the year if there were multiple. And I'll chat with you in the next one.